As the man shook off his umbrella and scanned the luxurious showroom, Mr. Stevens watched him with narrowed eyes. The polished floors gleamed with reflections of exotic cars, each with a six-figure price tag. To Stevens, every detail mattered, down to the type of shoes a customer wore, and this man's scuffed boots and plain attire didn't fit the profile. Stevens leaned over to his sales associate and whispered, "Another dreamer. Watch, he'll be out in 5 minutes." The man strolled toward a sleek, cherry-red sports car, running his hand along its polished surface. Stevens could barely hide his irritation. He straightened his tie, walked over briskly, and intercepted him. "Excuse me," Stevens said, his voice dripping with faux politeness, "can I help you with something? Or are you just here to look?" The man turned, his expression calm but firm. "Actually, I'm here to buy," he said simply. Stevens suppressed a chuckle. "Well," he said, gesturing to the price tag prominently displayed on the windshield, "these aren't exactly budget cars. Are you sure this is the right place for you?" The man's lips twitched into a faint smile. "I'm sure," he said, looking directly into Stevens' eyes, "but thank you for your concern." Stevens blinked, caught off guard by the man's steady demeanor. For a moment, he considered taking him seriously, but years of dismissing people like this had conditioned him otherwise. "Right," Stevens muttered, stepping back to observe. "Let me know if you have any questions about financing options." The man turned back to the car, his calm composure unshaken. Stevens walked away, shaking his head. "Wasting my time," he muttered under his breath, not realizing he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. Marcus remained composed despite the dismissive tone. He glanced around the showroom, his eyes lingering on a sleek black sedan that radiated sophistication and power. "Actually," he replied evenly, "I'm interested in that one. It's exactly what I'm looking for." Mr. Stevens scoffed. "That's the Vantage Elite," he said, crossing his arms. "Custom-built, limited edition, and priced at a cool $250,000. It's not for everyone." Marcus turned to face him. "I understand," he said calmly, "but I'd still like to take a closer look." Stevens hesitated, clearly debating whether it was worth his time. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, he led Marcus over to the car. "Here it is," Stevens said, gesturing to the vehicle. "A work of art, wouldn't you say? Of course, with something like this, you're paying for more than the car. You're paying for status, exclusivity, things not everyone can appreciate." Marcus studied the car thoughtfully, running his hand along the smooth finish. "It's beautiful," he said simply. "Can I see the interior?" Stevens hesitated again but relented, opening the door with a flourish. "Go ahead," he said. "But please, be careful." Marcus slid into the driver's seat, taking in the meticulously crafted details. The leather seats, the high-tech dashboard, the unmistakable luxury, it all spoke to him. But Stevens, watching from the side, couldn't help but mutter, "Bet he's never even sat in a car like this before." Marcus looked up. "It's perfect," he said, stepping out. "How soon could I drive it off the lot?" Stevens snorted, unable to hide his disbelief. "Drive it off the lot," he repeated, shaking his head. "Sir, with all due respect, this isn't something you can just decide to buy. It's a significant investment, and we require proof of financial stability before proceeding with anything serious." Marcus gave a small, knowing smile. "Noted," he said. "I'll keep that in mind." Stevens, convinced he had scared Marcus off, felt a sense of smug satisfaction as he walked back to his desk. Little did he know, Marcus wasn't going anywhere, and the tables were about to turn. Stevens leaned back in his chair, clearly frustrated by the persistent Marcus. "Look," Stevens said, tapping his fingers on his desk, "I get it. You like the car, but unless you can show me something substantial, I'm not going to waste any more time on this." Marcus stood tall, still calm, but now with a certain firmness in his voice. "Are you always this dismissive to potential buyers?" he asked. Stevens raised an eyebrow, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Only when they're clearly wasting my time," he replied, waving his hand dismissively. I don't need to explain this to you. If you can't prove you're serious about this purchase, then there's no point in continuing this charade. Marcus paused for a moment, weighing his words carefully. Then he spoke with quiet authority. I'm not wasting your time, Mr. Stevens. I'm trying to make a legitimate purchase. All I need from you is a little professionalism. Stevens snorted, clearly unconcerned. Professionalism, huh? Tell me, do you even know how much the deposit is for this kind of car? He clicked a few keys on his computer and shot Marcus a condescending look. 100,000 up front. Do you have that kind of money? Marcus smiled faintly. I'm sure you'll find I'm capable of covering the costs. Stevens leaned back in his chair, clearly growing impatient. Then I suggest you go home and think about whether you want to buy a car or just pretend to. There's no need for you to stick around and take up space here. We're not a charity. As Marcus turned to leave, Stevens thought it was finally over. He believed he had put the man in his place, dismissing him as another tire kicker. What Stevens didn't know was that Marcus wasn't going anywhere. The dealership hummed with anticipation as employees scrambled to prepare for the unexpected visit. Word had spread like wildfire. Today, the owner of the entire luxury car dealership chain would be making an appearance. For Mr. Stevens, this meant an opportunity to showcase his so-called expertise in managing the dealership. He straightened his tie, gave his desk a final wipe, and ran a hand through his hair, mentally rehearsing his best sales pitches. The employees, who had overheard murmurs of the owner's arrival, were on edge. Everyone knew that the owner was known for being a bit elusive, rarely showing up in person, but when he did, it was a big deal. Some assumed it would be an older, seasoned businessman, someone who would appreciate Stevens' long history of running the place. As the morning dragged on, Mr. Stevens went through the motions of checking the inventory, greeting customers, and preparing for what he assumed would be a quick, no-nonsense inspection. He had no idea that the person he had dismissed the day before was about to walk through the door again, but this time, things would be very different. At exactly noon, the dealership doors swung open. A tall man entered, accompanied by several suited individuals who walked behind him with purposeful strides. Stevens looked up, expecting to see a gray-haired man in his 60s, dressed in an expensive suit. But to his surprise, the man at the front was none other than Marcus, the same man he had insulted the day before. Marcus, now dressed impeccably in a sharp-tailored suit, exuded a quiet confidence that immediately captured the attention of everyone in the room. The staff froze, unsure how to react. Stevens, in particular, was left speechless. "Good morning, Mr. Stevens," Marcus said, his voice calm and commanding. He extended his hand with a smile that seemed to hold a quiet but potent power. Stevens stood there, momentarily dumbfounded, before quickly trying to recover. He extended his hand, though it felt stiff and uncertain. "Mr. Marcus, welcome," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "I wasn't expecting you. How can I assist you today?" Marcus smiled faintly. "I think I'll need a tour of the place first," he said smoothly. "Let's get started." As Stevens led Marcus through the showroom, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Marcus's composed demeanor suggested he wasn't here for a casual visit. The air was thick with the anticipation of a revelation, one Stevens wasn't prepared for. As Stevens led Marcus through the dealership, he noticed the atmosphere was different today. It felt heavier. His steps slowed as the full weight of the situation began to dawn on him. The employees, who had been bustling around in preparation for the surprise visit, were now watching them closely. Stevens tried to shake off the discomfort. But then, just as they passed the glass doors to his office, Marcus stopped and turned to face him. The sound of footsteps from the suited executives behind them grew louder, and Stevens' stomach churned. "Mr. Stevens," Marcus said, his voice firm yet composed. "I must say, this is an impressive establishment." Stevens, still trying to play the situation cool, smiled nervously. "Thank you, sir. We've worked hard to keep up the standard of excellence." He adjusted his tie, trying to appear professional, but it was clear something was off. With a small smile, Marcus replied, "I'm glad to hear that. But I think you'll find there are some new changes coming soon." Before Stevens could respond, one of the executives stepped forward and handed Marcus a folder. Marcus opened it briefly and glanced over the documents inside, his expression unreadable. The silence in the showroom was deafening, every eye on the group as they moved toward Stevens' office. Stevens, still oblivious to what was unfolding, followed them in. "So, Mr. Marcus, what brings you here today? Any specific vehicles you're interested in?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation back to something familiar. Marcus's gaze lingered on Stevens for a moment. Then, in a tone that was calm but unmistakably commanding, he said, "Actually, I'm here to discuss something more important than car sales." Stevens blinked, his heart racing. "Oh? Well, anything you need, of course. What can I do for you?" Marcus placed the folder on the desk. "I'm the new owner of this dealership," he said, his words slow and deliberate. Stevens froze. The words hit him like a punch in the stomach. The room seemed to tilt for a moment as the reality of the situation sank in. You're the..." Stevens stammered, his mind struggling to process the truth. "Yes," Marcus said, his voice unwavering. "I've recently acquired this entire dealership chain. Congratulations, Mr. Stevens. You're working for me now." Stevens stood there, completely dumbfounded. The man he had ridiculed, belittled, and dismissed was now his boss. The realization hit him hard. The smug arrogance he had carried the day before evaporated in an instant. Marcus turned to the executives behind him. "Let's begin the transition plan." Then, addressing Stevens again, he added, "Don't worry, though. I think we'll have a few discussions about how things are done around here." The weight of the moment hung in the air, and Stevens could do nothing but watch as Marcus, now the owner, took control of the dealership with quiet authority. The color drained from Mr. Stevens' face as Marcus's words sank in. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend what had just been revealed. This entire time, the man he had dismissed so easily was not some window shopper, but the very person who now held the reins of the entire dealership chain. Stevens, his hands suddenly trembling, took a step back. I didn't know," he stammered. "I never meant to offend you, sir. I was just trying to do my job." Marcus raised a hand, silencing him before he could continue. "It's too late for apologies, Mr. Stevens," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "You judged me based on my appearance, assuming I didn't belong here. And I saw firsthand how you treated potential customers, people just trying to find a car." Stevens opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had been so certain, so confident that he could tell who was worth his time and who wasn't. Now, that belief had backfired spectacularly. Marcus continued, his eyes steady and unwavering. "That ends today. No one walks into my dealership and gets treated like that. You'll find that I value respect, honesty, and fairness above all else. The arrogance you displayed is not how I run this business." Stevens, still frozen in place, could only nod weakly. He had no defense. No justification. The reality of his actions now loomed large, and he felt every ounce of his own humiliation. Marcus turned to the executives, who stood silently, watching the exchange unfold. "I want a complete review of the staff," Marcus said, his voice now commanding the room. "Let's make sure that something like this doesn't happen again." Turning back to Stevens, Marcus added, "As for you, I think it's time we had a discussion about your future here. Don't worry. You'll be hearing from HR soon." Stevens' stomach churned as he understood the full scope of the situation. The man he had tried to humiliate just the day before was now in control of his career. And worse, he was fully aware of Stevens' treatment of customers. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint shuffle of paperwork and the soft murmur of the staff in the background. Stevens could barely hold himself together as the weight of his mistake bore down on him. He had underestimated Marcus, and now it was too late to fix it. Marcus announced sweeping changes to the dealership, ensuring that respect and professionalism would become the new standard. From that moment on, every employee, whether sales associate or manager, would be expected to treat each customer with dignity and fairness. Arrogance and condescension would have no place in his dealership. Mr. Stevens, once so sure of his own place in the company, found himself at the bottom of the ladder. His demotion was swift and absolute. No longer in charge of the showroom, he was relegated to an entry-level position. For the first time in his career, Stevens was forced to learn the value of humility the hard way. He found himself performing tasks he once deemed beneath him, serving customers with the same respect that he had once denied them. Meanwhile, Marcus's leadership became a beacon for the rest of the staff. His calm authority and unwavering integrity earned him the admiration of both employees and customers alike. He proved, time and time again, that character, kindness, and respect for others always trumped arrogance. The dealership flourished under Marcus's guidance, attracting a new clientele who valued both the luxury of the cars and the welcoming environment that Marcus fostered. As for Stevens, he never forgot the lesson he learned that day, that appearances and assumptions could destroy careers, while integrity and humility could rebuild them. In the end, it was clear, Marcus's quiet confidence and strong sense of character had set the stage for a new era, one built on mutual respect, where everyone had a place and a voice. As weeks passed, the dealership transformed under Marcus's leadership. The once cold, high-pressure environment became a place of genuine connection and customer care. The sales staff, once driven by the desire to close deals at any cost, now focused on understanding the needs of their clients. Customers walked into the showroom with a sense of ease, no longer intimidated by the sharp-tongued remarks of Mr. Stevens or the condescending attitudes of the past. Meanwhile, Stevens adjusted to his new role with an ever-deepening sense of regret. He learned the ropes from the ground up, having to prove himself all over again. Every day, he faced the humbling task of assisting in the back office, handling paperwork, and interacting with customers in ways that were once beneath him. One afternoon, as Stevens was preparing paperwork for a client, he noticed something remarkable. A couple who had been treated poorly by the former management had returned. This time, however, they were greeted with kindness and patience. The couple, impressed by the shift in the dealership's atmosphere, decided to make a purchase. Stevens quietly observed, feeling the weight of his past mistakes. But in that moment, he also realized something profound. Marcus wasn't just changing the dealership's policies, he was changing lives. By promoting kindness and empathy, Marcus had created an environment where customers felt respected, not manipulated. Later that day, Stevens approached Marcus. "I want to thank you for what you've done, for both the dealership and me," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Marcus glanced up from his desk, his expression neutral but kind. "You're welcome, Mr. Stevens. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them." Stevens nodded, understanding now more than ever. In the weeks that followed, he worked harder than ever before, determined to prove his worth in this new chapter. While he may never regain his old status, he learned that true respect and success came not from titles or appearances, but from integrity, hard work, and the ability to grow. And as Marcus continued to lead the dealership with wisdom and compassion, it was clear that the new era had only just begun. Months had passed since Marcus took control of the dealership, and the transformation was undeniable. Sales had skyrocketed, but it was the renewed sense of trust and respect among employees and customers that truly set the business apart. No longer a place of judgment and arrogance, the dealership had become a model of professionalism and inclusivity, thanks to Marcus's leadership. Stevens, having embraced his new role, had slowly begun to regain the respect of his colleagues. He worked diligently to build relationships with customers, taking the time to understand their needs and provide them with the best service possible. His previous arrogance seemed like a distant memory as he found himself genuinely enjoying his new role and feeling a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. One afternoon, as Stevens helped a young couple select their first luxury car, Marcus entered the showroom. He watched the interaction quietly from the side, noting how Stevens's demeanor had changed. Gone was the arrogance and condescension, replaced with a warm, helpful attitude that made the customers feel at ease. After the couple left, satisfied with their purchase, Marcus approached Stevens. "I see a real change in you," Marcus said, his voice firm yet approving. Stevens looked up, a sense of pride swelling within him. "Thank you, sir. I've learned a lot. Not just about the business, but about treating people the right way." Marcus nodded. "That's what it's all about. People remember how you make them feel, not just the product you sell." Stevens smiled, realizing that he had finally understood the lesson that Marcus had imparted all those months ago. He wasn't just selling cars, he was building trust, one customer at a time. A few weeks later, Marcus called Stevens into his office. He was calm, but serious. "I've been watching you closely, Stevens. Your hard work, your growth, and your dedication have not gone unnoticed. I think it's time we discuss your future here." Stevens felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. He had worked tirelessly to earn Marcus's respect, and now he was finally getting the chance to prove himself even further. Marcus sat back in his chair and smiled. "I'm promoting you, Stevens. Not to your old position, but to something new. I want you to manage a team of salespeople, leading by example and ensuring that the culture of respect and professionalism stays strong." Stevens stood there, speechless for a moment. The position was a step up, but it was more than that, it was an opportunity to lead with the values he had learned. "Thank you, Marcus," he said, his voice sincere. "I won't let you down." Marcus smiled, his voice calm but firm. "I know you won't. Welcome to the next chapter." As Stevens walked out of the office, he realized that he had truly come full circle. From an arrogant, dismissive manager to a respected leader, he had learned that real success wasn't about wealth, status, or appearances, it was about integrity, respect, and the ability to grow. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that Marcus had not only changed the dealership, but had changed him for the better years past, and the dealership continued to thrive under Marcus's steady leadership. What was once a high-end car lot filled with arrogance and elitism had transformed into a community-driven business, where employees were empowered, and customers felt genuinely valued. Marcus's vision for respect, professionalism, and integrity had taken root deeply within the culture of the dealership, and its success became a testament to his approach. Stevens, now firmly entrenched in his role as a team leader, had become a mentor to younger employees. His reputation had shifted from being a former arrogant manager to a humble leader who truly cared about the people he worked with. He often found himself coaching new hires, emphasizing the lessons he had learned in his own journey, the importance of treating everyone with respect and the value of hard work over status. One day, as Stevens stood in front of a group of eager young salespeople, he noticed Marcus watching from across the showroom floor. Marcus smiled approvingly as Stevens spoke, his tone calm but commanding as he explained how to balance meeting sales goals with fostering genuine relationships with clients. "Remember," Stevens said, his voice steady, "people don't just buy cars from you, they buy trust. They buy the experience of being treated with honesty and respect." As the team nodded in agreement, Stevens felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. This wasn't just about selling cars anymore. This was about building a legacy of trust, one customer and one employee at a time. After the meeting, Stevens walked over to Marcus. "You've done a remarkable job with this team," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride. "It's clear that your leadership has inspired them." Stevens nodded. "I've learned from the best." Marcus chuckled. "You've become a leader in your own right, Stevens. Your growth is the proof that this dealership, and the values we've instilled here, are working." But Stevens, ever humble, shook his head. "I'm just following the path you set. You taught me that leadership isn't about title or power, it's about integrity and putting people first. That's the lesson I try to pass on." Marcus's expression softened. "And that's why I trust you. You've not only learned the lesson, you've embraced it. And now, you're teaching it to others. This place wouldn't be the same without you." Stevens smiled, feeling the weight of the words settle in his chest. The dealership had not only transformed into a better business but had become a reflection of the values that Marcus and Stevens had worked so hard to build together. As the years passed, the dealership continued to grow, but it was more than just a successful business. It had become a beacon of leadership, respect, and humility, values that would live on through every employee and every customer. And Stevens, having come full circle, realized that the true legacy wasn't in the cars they sold or the profits they made. It was in the way they treated people and the change they had sparked, not just within the dealership, but in the lives of everyone they interact. The success of Marcus's leadership and Stevens's transformation was not confined to the dealership's walls. Word about the new atmosphere at the dealership spread across the community. Customers returned not just because they wanted to buy a car, but because they trusted the people who worked there. It became known as more than just a luxury car dealership. It was a place where people were treated with dignity, where honesty was valued over high-pressure sales tactics. Local business owners, and even competitors, began to take note. Many had seen the dealership as just another high-end showroom catering to the wealthy, but now, it was a symbol of a new standard for customer service and business ethics. One afternoon, a local restaurant owner, who had been a loyal customer for years, stopped by to meet Marcus. "I've heard a lot about the changes you've made around here," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "I've never seen a dealership where people genuinely care like you do. I think it's time I brought my whole team here to see what it's all about." Marcus smiled, but his response was humble. "It's not about the cars we sell. It's about the relationships we build." Stevens, hearing the conversation from across the showroom, felt a swell of pride. He could see firsthand how Marcus's vision had transcended the dealership. The culture they had nurtured was now influencing the surrounding community. Other businesses began to reach out to learn more about how Marcus had managed to create such a profound change. What had once seemed like a simple business model based on cars was now a beacon of ethical business practices. Over time, Stevens's role evolved once again. He became a key figure in the broader initiative to spread Marcus's principles throughout the community. He started mentoring leaders from other local businesses, sharing what he had learned, the importance of valuing employees, treating customers with respect, and creating a culture of kindness and integrity. It was clear to Stevens now that what Marcus had created wasn't just a successful business model, it was a movement. People didn't just want to buy cars from them, they wanted to be part of something bigger, something that stood for honesty and respect in an often cutthroat world. One day, Marcus called Stevens into his office. As Stevens walked in, Marcus looked up and smiled. "You've done more than just transform the dealership, Stevens," Marcus said. "You've helped create with